Well, Toyah, it's kind of an understatement to say that you really inspired me, because you really, really did. And I think what was just so intriguing as I was growing up and just seeing you blossom on our screens was how you brought all of these different art forms together. And it just felt right. You know what I mean? There was just such an incredible creative spirit there.
Thank you very much for saying that, and it's very generous of you to say that. At the time, it was quite a battle of my sheer will and determination against an industry that liked people to be really in a compartment. So when I started at the National Theatre at the age of 18, at the end of 1976, I was at the National at a time where actors were not allowed to do voiceovers. If you wanted to be taken seriously, you wouldn't dream of doing an advert. And some stage actors would not even dream of doing TV drama. There was very much division between every style of acting and music. And I think what I did, I knew from a very early age. My mother took me to see The Sound of Music about 7 times in 3 months when I was about 7 years old. And I just knew that the two should never be separated, and that was singing and the joy of expressing yourself like a bird in the trees as a songstress, and the joy of expressing yourself through movement and acting. For me, they very much went together, but I also need to add, I never felt that I wanted to be a stage musical artist. My idea was to have 2 completely separate careers.
It's so interesting that, because in a way, when we're at school as infants, bringing all of the art forms together is so natural. We sing, we dance, we draw, we say things, build stories, and put little words and sentences together and so on. And so all of the expression is this kind of milking pot. And it seems extraordinary that then that isn't even cultivated more as we get older, but in fact it sort of recedes into this kind of very odd...
I think it's time and space. I had a phenomenal music teacher, and I believe she taught maths as well. She was called Miss Nelson. And I was one of those typical dyslexics at school where I peaked and troughed, peaked and troughed. I kept excelling and being top of the class, and then falling right back to behind the class. And by the time I was 11, I couldn't peak again within that system. But what Miss Nelson did was she realized that I was dyslexic at a time when dyslexia wasn't recognized within the school system. And she realized I had a vast understanding, a natural body understanding of music. So she would push the desks to the side of the walls during everyone's class and put on Holst Planet Suite. And I would just be in the center of the room, dancing furiously in a state of emotional ecstasy, because that music was informing me so much of a great story, and it helped me with my maths and everything. So I've always had that gift of people recognizing that movement for me is a language as much as music is a language.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in a way, I suppose everything is a language.
Yes.
When you think about it, I mean, I look out the window now and there's just tiny little flakes of snow coming down. I mean, that's a language, because it informs you that, well, it might be a good idea to put a jacket on, or a hat on, or just watch your footing as you go out in case you fall flat on your face or something. I mean, it's giving you a message. But it's interesting in that the planets were used, because I suppose, and tell me if I'm wrong, that it wasn't stated that that's a classical piece of music.
It was classical in my eyes, because I grew up with the Beatles, Tommy Steele.
Okay.
I grew up with Tom Jones, and the planets for me was this luxurious feast. There was no introduction about it being classical at all. It was just this wonderfully visual piece of music. Mars, you can express Holst Mars so beautifully, and then you get Neptune, and then you get Jupiter, and they're so poetic, they're so incredible. And I recognized that above everyone else in the class. And Miss Nelson realized that she was unlocking a potential in me that was about to be lost once I went into the senior school. And that was quite tragic, because it did get lost. And I didn't find that in myself again until I heard Mark Bolan and David Bowie. And suddenly you had these incredibly visual artists who were so out on a limb musically that it beckoned me in like a Pied Piper. I was stimulated and interested and fascinated, and that helped really give me a will to be myself, because I was always considered an oddball that didn't quite fit into the mold of every other woman in the room. So when artists like David Bowie, Alice Cooper, Mark Bolan, even early Roxy Music came along, I thought, well, that's where I belong.